Weapon Rogue continues to be one of the strongest decks in the current meta, even though it has not received any new cards. The idea behind the deck is you want to be able to get your weapon, your quick pick, or just your dagger, but preferably your quick pick, along with the 3 drop to be able to get your weapon buffed to 3/3, and then you can use things like Sharp Shipment or Deadly Poison or mic drop and things like that to be able to increase the damage as well. The idea behind it is most of your, or pretty much all of your weapon swings will be going towards face, especially once it has been buffed up to an increased cost. The cards you want to mulligan for is the quick pick, dig for treasure, and your Swordshiner. Those cards in particular are your main win conditions in terms of being able to take out your opponent quite easily. Going into the gameplay, you'll see that I have just used Dig for Treasure. I'm also keeping my Deafen on not using it onto any of these minions, just in case they do have it for their Defense Crystal. If they did have a Defense Crystal, using the Deafen means that the Star Piece doesn't go into their pool as well, which is really detrimental for a Shaman's game plan, especially against a deck like this. They do have quite a lot of their starships on the board as well, which is a little bit concerning for me, especially if they do end up getting a defense crystal out, and I obviously need to consider that. I currently have the mic drop and deadly poison combo in my hand, so I'm just going to use that so I can go face into my opponent and deal a lot of damage to them. Obviously, I'm not going to be trading in this sort of situation here. I end up drawing the hip drop, which is quite good as well. It means I can deal some more damage going into the next turn against them. Obviously, the double eviscerate allows for a lot of burst damage coming from my hand as well. They end up just using their starport and then playing down a gold panna, so there's nothing really too scary at the moment from them. They're not able to deal lethal using Bloodlust, but they're still a turn off that anyway. I also do draw into another deadly poison, which is quite strong for me too. I play the deadly poison down, and I'm just deciding what my best sort of play is. They are on 19 health, and they will get 7 health back from their starship that they have. So I just use the hip drop. It gets my weapon a little bit bigger, so I can deal 10 to them, and then obviously it puts them down to 6 health. And then I end up using the O Manager to go more into their face as well, so it somewhat lulls them into a false sense of security. A mistake of sorts that I made this turn is using the gear shift, the coin and gear shift. There wasn't really any point doing that because of the fact that, yes, those cards aren't very useful at this current point in time for me, but it's possible they may have been useful, along with the fact that they could have potentially ended up drawing into some sort of lethal against me. Obviously, I didn't end up getting punished because it allowed me to draw into the hip hop drop, but in reality, it wasn't exceptional because having the coin is more important in general for this sort of gameplay. So I use my double eviscerate and the hip drop. It ends up dealing exactly the 11 damage, and that's the first game. So as you can see, Weapon Rogue does have a lot of power behind it that you can just unleash from hand, even if you do run out of your weapon swings. Obviously, it's important that you consider your options when you do the weapon swing and it destroys it, because once you lose those big weapons, you're not going to be able to create another massive weapon again in a future turn. Once again, the mulligan I want to do is for Dig for Treasure, Quick Pick, and for the Swordshiner, so there's none of these cards really are ones that I want to be keeping. I'm obviously just thinking at the moment about the Deadly Poison, just because of the fact that it means that I can trade into them if they are using an aggressive deck. But in reality, I decide not to, just because of the fact that if I don't end up getting set up, I will more than likely lose anyway. I did get Quick Pick in my opening hand, which is good. Obviously, I don't have the Swordshiner yet, so that's something that needs to be thought about as well. I do end up playing down the Quick Pick, and now I'm just deciding whether to use the Quick Pick to go face or not. I end up deciding to. Obviously, without the Swordshiner, it does make it a little bit tricky to decide what your best choice is going to be in that sort of situation. They end up playing down their Gold Panna, and then they go face with their Miracle Salesman, so it's not too bad of a situation for me. I use the stick up here just because it could potentially get me the AoE with the heat wave just to clear their board for the moment. I don't want them to be drawing any extra cards than what I need them to. And I do have Sharp Shipment in my hand, so I'm just holding the quick pick for one more turn. If I don't draw into anything this following turn, I will be using that to go into my opponent, the weapon, and then I'll just have to re-equip another weapon. They do play down their Overzealous Healer and their Coin, along with their Gold Panel, which does allow them obviously to set up against me. I draw into a Deafen, which is fine. I use the prep to get the Dubious Purchase because I am once again hoping that I can get a quick pick or something along those lines. I do end up drawing into another quick pick, which is good, but in this sort of situation, I use that extra quick pick swing because I had 2 mana that I would be floating otherwise, and there wouldn't have been any particular play that I would have been doing. The quick pick, in reality, with this sort of hand, doesn't really... It adds a bit, but it's not an exceptional amount compared to the other cards that are possible for it. I end up just swinging... using the Eviscerate and trading into my opponent's board because they are getting to a point where they're dealing a lot of damage towards me, and I do need to make it so I can survive, because if they do end up obviously getting to that lethal point, it's going to be too much for me. They play down a Sentry and then their Photon Cannon, which reduces down the cost of their other minions. They do obviously have now 3 minions on the board. The Sentry that's the 2/2 means that I can just use the Deafen onto both of them just to get rid of them. It means that they won't be able to get any extra... it means that they won't be able to get any extra procs off it, so they won't get cheaper minions for their mothership, while also meaning that I'm getting on with my game plan. I use the Coin and Deadly Poison here just to be able to increase the damage my weapon swing is going to be doing. Next turn is always going to be playing down the Sharp Shipment because they currently still do have 21 damage on the board. They use another Hallucination plus onto their Sentry. Then they play down a Void Ray, so I won't be able to clear this using my Deafen because obviously I just used both of the Deafens. I draw into another Hip Drop, which is quite good for me. They are sitting on 11 health, so at the moment I do need to consider what choices are there. I use the stick up just because of the fact that it allows me to get me the extra, possibly get me some extra health, which is obviously quite important to be able to deal with them. I then do the weapon swing towards their face because they're not going to be able to do lethal even with Artanis. They use the Chill and Vol'jin, which doesn't really do anything for them because all their minions are quite similar cost. So in reality, they're not actually gaining too much by doing the Chilling Vol'jin here. They then put the Orbital Halo onto their Sentry and then just go face, so it heals them up a tiny bit, but I do just have lethal sitting in my hand. Yeah, it's like there's not really too much that they could really do in this sort of situation. Although I didn't draw exceptionally hot at the start of the game, I did obviously have lethal coming from all my weapon swings and things like that. So yeah, like it obviously is important that you do use your weapon when you can, but you don't want to be destroying it unless you're actually going to lose tempo. Playing against Death Knight in general is quite an easy matchup because a lot of the Death Knights don't run any sort of taunt, they don't run the Orbital Halo, and since you're just dealing face, they don't have another way to heal that damage either. So all of your damage that you end up using in this matchup does end up sticking. So it makes it obviously a lot more difficult for your opponent to be able to deal with your weapon swings going into them. And quite often they don't run any sort of freeze to be able to stop an extra turn or 2 of damage. So in reality, you're just wanting to get your weapon ready and then be dealing as much damage as you can to your opponent as quick as possible. Obviously with my Mulligan, I didn't end up drawing anything particularly good for this matchup, but I just equipped the weapon, and since I don't have anything useful really in my hand, I just end up passing. The 1 damage isn't that important here, especially since I can obviously deal a lot more damage next turn coming from all my different procs and such. So I used the hip hop drop first, and then I used the mic drop. Either way would have been fine. Like, there's not really, wouldn't really be any extra play that I'd need to do, especially since I did have the prep in my hand. And drawing obviously into the sharp shipment means that I'm in a commanding position because my opponent, like next turn they'll be going down to 15, and then the turn after they won't really have anything else. Obviously, doing the Infester means that they get a little bit of a board, but they're nowhere near being able to deal lethal to me. And I don't need to trade into any of these minions to increase the amount of health that their minions have too. So I just play the sharp shipment down. I then just go face and just pass over to them. Obviously, with them on 15 health, they do end up just conceding because there isn't really anything that's favorable in that situation for them, and that's the game. So like that shows the power of the deck in terms of Death Knight, because yeah, Death Knight is a very favorable matchup for this deck. Going into the next game, I am playing against a Death Knight. Obviously, it is quite similar to last time that you need to make sure that you are using your weapon effectively into them. You're swinging all your damage pretty much towards their face, and you're making sure you're holding your deafen just in case for the potential infester turn. I do obviously have the Swordshiners here, and I have the dig for treasure. In general, it's better just mulliganing the Swordshiners here and just keeping the dig for treasure, because it allows you to get an extra coin in your hand. The mic drop isn't that useful as well. Like, I could potentially keep it, but I am also looking for a quick pick. I end up getting 2 dig for treasures as well, and the mic drop back into my hand anyway. So they just play down their Miracle Salesman. I do end up getting a gear shift. I use my dig for treasure, which guarantees the Swordshiner. And then I use the second dig for treasure as well. It gets me another Swordshiner, but it also means that those cards are out of my deck. Although I did obviously burn a coin doing that, it's much better getting that the other card out of the deck, since the dig for treasure would end up being useless if I did draw into the Swordshiner again. I end up getting a stick up. Since I do have the Swordshiner in my hand, I just end up using the weapon swing to go face. Obviously, when you do that, you want to make sure that if you don't have any extra buff of weapon, there's no point dealing an extra 1 damage in those sorts of situations. I play down the Swordshiner here. It gets me up to a 3/3 weapon. I then use both my coins and then use the hip hop drop. Obviously, it allows me to deal extra damage towards my opponent and just pass over to them. So since I'm currently sitting on 25 health, they're not really still in a position to be able to deal too much to me. They end up getting a Lurker, which does obviously increase their damage output significantly, so it's important that I do make sure that I get rid of that as quickly as possible, because if they end up getting a bunch of Zergs or even just smaller minions onto the board, they will end up dealing quite a lot of extra damage that is going to be too much for me. They end up playing down their Zergling, so it does show that they are going to go for the big Lurker play on me. At the moment, they'd be dealing a lot of extra damage, so I do need to make sure I get rid of that. I use the stick up first, just because there are quite a lot of cards that you can get that can deal with the Lurker. I end up getting the Silver Serpent, which then allows me to just trade into it. Another card that you could use is like the Trolley Problem or those sorts of things, so there were a few options that I could have ended up getting from that anyway. I then just send my weapon swing face into them. Obviously I got an extra 6 damage onto them, which is quite good. They end up playing down their spawning pool. They still have a bunch of Zerglings down on the board as well, so it's still not an extremely good position for me at the moment. They use their Zergling to trade into me, both their Zerglings and then their Buccaneer. This obviously allows them to have a decent setup going into next turn against me. I do have the weapon swing, and I just use it because I do have the Swordshiner that's I can use to obviously get it rebuffed up. I wasn't in a position that I'd be able to get lethal guaranteed next turn anyway, so getting the Swordshiner on the board applies some tempo. Like, it was likely I could have gotten lethal with the hand that I had, but it wasn't a certainty. Because if they ended up having Carrigan through their Nidus Worm, it would have meant that I would have been in a significantly worse position. I yeah, so they're sitting, they're sitting with they're deciding what their best strategy to do is. They got the Chillforge Baron, but since I do have so much damage currently sitting on the board, it means that they won't be able to deal lethal to me anyway. And with my weapon and all those into my hand, I do obviously have enough damage to be able to deal lethal towards them. Then I send my weapon face and just take them out fully. So yeah, once again, it's relatively easy matchup. Even if you don't draw exceptionally good, you are obviously able to deal a lot of damage towards their face, which is generally too much for them. Playing against Rogue is relatively similar to your gameplay for Death Knight. In general, a lot of your damage you're just wanting to send face towards them, especially since the Rogue doesn't have any taunts or any heals that will be able to deal with you. A lot of your damage will end up going and sticking onto them. They can obviously use Stick Up, which does allow them to then get the extra health potentially, but it's not very likely that they will use Stick Up in most of the different archetypes, especially since Archon Rogue, which is obviously now being played since they did just use that card, the Space Rock Collector. It means that I am not in a situation that's really too worrying about it. I do end up just trading into the 2-1 because I don't want to take any extra damage than what I need to. Next turn I'll be playing down the Swordshiner. Turn 4 we'll be playing Deadly Poison and Mic Drop more than likely. And yeah, I'll be pretty much off in this game. There's not really too much of a situation that I have here. I end up playing down the Swordshiner. I don't really... I could have potentially just used the Dig for Treasure there. It doesn't really matter too much. Obviously having... It means that there's not the chance of you drawing into the Swordshiner, but it is a 1 in 24 that I'd get punished by doing this sort of play. Obviously getting access then to the coin is a lot better for me. Yeah. And then I end up playing the Deadly Poison and then the Mic Drop, like I mentioned before. Obviously, once again, I still haven't used that Dig for Treasure, which potentially is a little bit of a misplay, but you are then able to obviously access more powerful options if you do use the Dig for Treasure to allow for your combo. They end up just sending their damage face. Since I'm on 23 health and it's turn 4, I'm in a situation that I'm significantly in front. I do end up drawing into my second Dig for Treasure. I use the Sharp Shipment here. Obviously, it means that I get the amount of damage that I need. And then right now I'm just thinking of if I'm going to use the Gear Shift or not. I end up opting to use the Gear Shift. Once again, it probably was better just using the Dig for Treasure in this situation. Just simply because, I could have got another coin coming from it. It allows you to draw a card. But they obviously end up just conceding like that. It wasn't really much of a match that it wasn't really a match in that sort of game. There's not really too much that you can do with a rogue into weapon rogue like that. Going into Hunter, it's once again quite similar that you are playing an aggressive sort of stance towards them. They will be generally playing either Zerg Hunter or Grunter Hunter. Either way, your game plan doesn't really change too much, and it doesn't change too much in many of the games. You're pretty much just sending all your damage face. Deafen's used in general for taunt minions, and there's not really too much else that you need to worry about. I do obviously have the quick pick in this opening hand plus 2 deadly poisons, which is quite strong. What I'd love to have right now is know that I'm going to be able to draw into the Swordshiner. I end up just sending a swing into the monkey just because of the fact that it's possible that I end up still hitting the Swordshiner. If I don't, it's not the end of the world. They end up using a reserve spot, which does show that they're going to be playing Grunter Hunter, because if it wasn't the guy, it would have meant that they, if it wasn't the Grunt, they would have had on the Zergling, which would have then obviously been played that turn for the 5 damage. I end up just sending my quick pick into face, and I just re-establish my weapon again, since I don't particularly have anything to do at the moment. Oh, sorry, I used Dubious Purchase, since I don't really have anything to do at the moment. Since I had the second prep in my hand, it didn't matter too much if I was getting too close on being overdrawing. I end up then just using my prep and then O Manager, which brings me back down to the 9 cards. I don't use the coins to get the weapon. There's no real point in doing that. Obviously, it's a little bit of a waste, especially since they can use Ice Trap and things like that. Yeah, and then they use their Titan Forge traps, which does show that they're more than likely going to be having Ice Trap, which does obviously end up showing. I use the other coin. I then establish the weapon, and then I just play down my Swordshiner and see what ends up happening. It could have been a Rat Trap in that situation, but it wasn't. And then I just send the 3 damage face towards them. They do get the 1/6, which then will allow it to get a taunt. So if they trade twice, they'd then be able to get a 6/6 taunt. So this is something that I'm going to have to deal with in one of these turns, because they more than likely will use the 1/6 to trade into my 3/3. They do end up using their Discover, and then they get another card with their tracking. It wasn't obvious, so it seems like they didn't get the Alien Encounters or Niall. It would have been Niall that turn if they'd gotten it, because it would have been for the 4-drop, but obviously they didn't end up getting that. I do have my Swordshiner as a 3/2. In this situation, choosing Pocket Sand's going to be the best, because I don't want them to be able to get the 6/6 with Taunt out, so I end up just using that to deal with their minion. Then I put the Deadly Poison onto my weapon, and I just trade into the 1/4. I could have potentially used Backstab and Valera's Gift in that turn. Obviously, it would have then meant that I wouldn't have wasted any mana doing it, but it doesn't really matter too much, since the Backstab can also allow me to get an extra Deadly Poison proc off, and the 1/1 isn't really posing too much of a threat towards me, especially since I could just use Valera's Gift as well to do Fan of Knives if I needed to cycle through some more cards. They end up getting the Niall, and it's quite obvious that was an Alien Encounter, since they grabbed it out so quick. Alien Encounters is a terrible card for this sort of matchup. I end up trading into the 1/1 with my 3/1, because I know that they do have the Grunt in their hand, and I don't want them to be able to deal any extra damage than what they possibly could. They end up then using a tracking. It once again is chosen pretty quickly, so it's another important card for them. They use the Sneaky Snakes, which gets them some more minions onto the board, and then they use that Alien Encounters that they ended up getting, and just send the 3/4 into my face. They then use the Bird Watching, which obviously allows them to get an extra card out of their hand, and that more than likely is going to be the fish. So I am going to more than likely have to finish this game a lot quicker. They end up using the Cup of Muscle then as well. I do have a Dig for Treasure that I get, so I've just used that to be able to clear it out of my deck. I then use the Stick Up just in case. It obviously could potentially help me with the future, with the play here. The Rehydrate is relatively decent, because it puts me back up to nearly full health, which means that they more than likely won't have enough damage going into next turn anyway. I do obviously still have the weapon proc as well. I just send the O Manager face. It then allows me to get my mic drop online and ready. Since I do have 2 coins anyway, I can obviously use them, and luckily for me, I then do draw into both of the Deafens, which then is able to clear the 2 of their taunts, and then I can just go face. So as you can see, Weapon Rogue is quite a powerful deck. It does have a weakness against taunts, which is the reason why that you keep the Deafens, but in general, it's easy to climb with. If you've enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and bye for now.